Michael Jackson children didn't arrive by accident. They arrived by design. This is not a love story. It sets not even a family story. It sets a transaction. And every transaction has a cost. Michael didn't want a wife. He didn't want a relationship. He wanted children without risk, without rejection, without negotiation. Because relationships require compromise, children, if designed correctly, do not. After losing Lisa Marie Presley, Michael faced a reality he couldn't tolerate. Time was running out, and control was slipping. So he made a deal. A deal that gave him fatherhood, without intimacy, without unpredictability, and without a real family. Debbie Rowe didn't enter Michael's life as a partner. She entered as a solution. And the children born from that solution were never meant to fix the future. They were meant to repair the past. This is the story of how Michael Jackson tried to rebuild his stolen childhood by engineering a family, and why that plan was doomed the moment it worked. Michael Jackson's desire to have children wasn't simply a biological urge, it was an almost obsessive need, and its roots lay deep in Michael's own stolen childhood. Michael never got to be a child. He was performing on stage at 8 years old, already a star by 9, and by 14 his childhood was completely finished. As an adult, he believed the only way to compensate for this loss was to raise his own children in a perfect environment. Neverland Ranch was built for this purpose. The amusement parks, the zoo, the train tracks were all added because Michael wanted his children to experience the childhood he never had. But having children required a partner first, and Michael's romantic relationships always ended in disaster because no one could truly trust him. Everyone wanted something. Everyone approached with an agenda. His marriage to Lisa Marie Presley collapsed partly for this reason. Lisa Marie didn't want children yet. She wanted to fix the marriage first, but Michael couldn't wait. His obsession with fatherhood was so powerful that every delay made him more desperate. And then Debbie Rowe offered a solution, a non-romantic, emotionally unburdened, purely functional motherhood. When Michael accepted this offer, what he was actually giving up was clear. A real family, because a real family was complicated, unpredictable, uncontrollable. But the arrangement with Debbie could be controlled, and for Michael, control mattered more than anything else. If you're interested in understanding the human psychology behind these extraordinary decisions, consider subscribing. We're exploring the choices that shaped one of history's most complex figures, not to judge, but to understand. The foundation of Michael's parental obsession was established in Gary, Indiana, where childhood wasn't protected space, but a training ground. Joe Jackson treated his children like investments, and Michael, with his exceptional voice and charisma, was the most valuable asset. There were no lazy Saturday mornings, no unstructured playtime, no opportunity to simply be a kid. Every moment was scheduled, every action had consequences, and mistakes meant physical punishment. Michael described looking out at other children playing while he rehearsed for hours, feeling profound loss, awareness that something fundamental was being taken, that he would never get back. This stolen childhood became the organizing wound of Michael's adult life. He collected toys obsessively, surrounded himself with children, built Neverland Ranch complete with carnival rides and exotic animals. Critics interpreted this as suspicious, but for Michael it was reconstructive therapy, an attempt to experience vicariously what he'd been denied. But proximity wasn't enough, and eventually Michael arrived at the logical conclusion: he needed his own children, children he could protect, children who would live the childhood he could only imagine. This wasn't a casual desire or traditional life milestone. This was a mission with the intensity of a calling, and it colored every romantic relationship Michael attempted. When he married Lisa Marie Presley in 1994, he was transparent. He wanted children soon, and wanted to be the father who was present and emotionally available in ways his own father never managed. Lisa Marie understood the desire but was alarmed by its urgency. She had children from a previous marriage and wasn't ready to immediately start a new family. She wanted time to build their relationship first. But Michael experienced this reasonable request as fundamental rejection. He couldn't wait, because waiting felt like losing more time, more opportunity. Arguments about timing became arguments about commitment, and those became arguments about whether Lisa Marie truly loved him. The marriage, already strained by Michael's drug dependency and media scrutiny following the 1993 allegations, couldn't survive this incompatibility. When they divorced in 1996, Michael wasn't just losing a wife, he was losing his imagined future as a father, and that loss was devastating. Enter Debbie Rowe. She had worked as a dermatology assistant for Dr. Arnold Klein since the mid-1980s, treating Michael's vitiligo for years. This meant she had witnessed Michael at his most vulnerable, had seen him without makeup covering the depigmentation, had heard insecurities he shared with almost no one. Over time, a friendship developed based on familiarity and professional intimacy. Debbie knew Michael's medical history, understood his physical insecurities, and observed his deteriorating emotional state as the Lisa Marie marriage collapsed. Exactly who first broached the subject remains unclear. What's certain is that at some point in early 1996, a conversation happened. Debbie could get pregnant, carry the baby to term, and Michael could have the child he desperately wanted. This wasn't framed as romance or traditional co-parenting. This was presented as a service, a gift, a solution. Debbie later described it as wanting to help someone she cared about, someone who deserved to experience fatherhood. The arrangement had a transactional clarity that probably appealed to Michael. There would be no emotional unpredictability, no arguments about timing, no risk of rejection. Debbie was willing, the path was clear, and Michael could finally achieve the goals central to his sense of purpose. In November 1996, with Debbie 6 months pregnant, they married in Sydney, Australia. The wedding was brief, photographs awkward, and no one believed this was a love match. It didn't matter, because it wasn't supposed to be. This was a legal formality, to ensure the child would be born into legitimate marriage. Prince Michael Jackson Jr. was born on February 13, 1997, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Michael was present for the birth, and the moment he held his son, something shifted. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was a real infant who would grow into a real child, and Michael was responsible for giving this boy everything he himself had been denied. The joy was profound, but so was the weight of responsibility. Debbie's role after birth was minimal, and became more minimal as weeks passed. She didn't move into Neverland Ranch, didn't establish daily routine with the baby, and when she visited, it was more as friendly observer than active mother. The media speculated about the strangeness of the arrangement, but Michael seemed unconcerned. He had his son, he was a father, and the specifics of how that came to be were irrelevant. 14 months later, on April 3, 1998, Paris Michael Catherine Jackson was born, again with Debbie as birth mother and Michael as immediate primary parent. The pattern repeated: Debbie gave birth, Michael took custody, and day-to-day parenting fell entirely to Michael and his staff at Neverland. 2 children, 2 pregnancies, 2 births, and an arrangement executed exactly as planned. In October 1999, less than 18 months after Paris's birth, Michael and Debbie divorced. The settlement was handled quietly, with Debbie reportedly receiving a financial package in exchange for giving Michael full custody. She also agreed to terminate her parental rights, though she would later petition to have those restored. At the time of divorce, the arrangement seemed complete. Michael had achieved fatherhood, Debbie had fulfilled her role, and both could move forward. But the simplicity of this narrative masked uncomfortable questions. What about the children themselves? Prince and Paris were being raised in extraordinary circumstances. A father who was the most famous entertainer in the world, no mother present, and a home environment, part amusement park, part fortress, entirely disconnected from normal childhood. Michael believed he was giving them the childhood he never had, but was he actually giving them a different kind of abnormal upbringing? Instead of too much discipline and no play, they had unlimited play and questionable structure. Instead of exposure to the adult world, they were sheltered to an extreme, often wearing masks in public. Debbie's later interviews revealed a woman wrestling with consequences of her choices. She insisted she had no regrets about helping Michael become a father, that he deserved that experience, and she was proud of her role. But she also described the strangeness of watching her biological children grow up in photographs and occasional visits, of being genetically connected but functionally absent. When asked about her famous comment, "Michael was so kind to me when I was pregnant," she explained it wasn't meant to sound transactional, but to express Michael had been considerate during a vulnerable time. The phrasing, though, revealed everything about their relationship. Kindness was noteworthy because affection wasn't the foundation. The question of biological parentage became another source of endless speculation. Prince and Paris were notably light-skinned, with features that didn't obviously resemble Michael or Debbie, leading to persistent rumors about sperm donors and the actual genetic origins of the children. Michael never addressed these rumors directly, and Debbie's statements on the subject were ambiguous at best. From Michael's perspective, biology was probably irrelevant. These were his children legally and emotionally, and genetic contribution mattered far less than the relationship he was building with them. As the children grew, Michael's parenting style became more visible and more controversial. He was simultaneously overprotective and permissive, shielding them from normal social interaction, while also indulging their every whim within the confines of Neverland. He homeschooled them with private tutors, limited their contact with children outside the estate, and created an environment where their father was the center of their universe. This wasn't malicious. It was Michael's attempt to create the perfect childhood, but perfection in this case meant control, and control meant isolation. The arrangement with Debbie revealed something fundamental about Michael's psychology. His need to control the parameters of his life extended even to the creation of his family. A traditional relationship would have required compromise, negotiation, acceptance of another person's autonomy and desires. The agreement with Debbie eliminated those complications. She provided the biological component necessary for pregnancy, but Michael retained complete authority over how the children would be raised, where they would live, what kind of life they would have. It was family as architectural project, with Michael as the sole designer. But architecture, no matter how carefully planned, can't fully replace organic growth. Children need more than one parent's vision. They need multiple perspectives. They need to witness functional adult relationships. They need to understand that families involve compromise and complexity. Prince and Paris were being raised in a bubble designed by someone who himself had never experienced normal family dynamics, and the long-term consequences of that reality wouldn't become apparent until much later. When Michael died in 2009, the children were 12 and 11 years old, and suddenly their carefully constructed world collapsed. The father who had been their entire universe was gone, and they had to navigate grief, public scrutiny, and a family structure they barely knew. Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, became their legal guardian, and they were suddenly part of the extended Jackson family in ways they hadn't been before. Debbie Rowe, their biological mother who had been largely absent, reappeared and attempted to establish a relationship, creating confusion about her role and her rights. The children themselves have spoken sparingly about their upbringing, but what they have shared suggests both genuine love for their father and awareness of the abnormality of their childhood. They describe Michael as devoted, playful, and protective, but also acknowledge the isolation, the strangeness of never having a mother, the complexity of being raised by someone the world saw as increasingly troubled and erratic. Debbie Rowe's role in this story is perhaps the most ethically ambiguous. She wasn't coerced. She made a choice to help someone she cared about achieve something meaningful to him. But surrogacy in the traditional sense involves carrying a child for parents who will raise that child together. What Debbie did was carry children for a single parent who would raise them alone, and then she removed herself almost entirely from their lives. The children grew up knowing she existed, but not really knowing her, having a biological mother who was functionally absent by design. In later years, as medical technology advanced and surrogacy became more common and regulated, Debbie's arrangement with Michael would be seen through a different lens. The ethical frameworks around gestational carriers, parental rights, and the best interests of children would make such an informal, personally negotiated arrangement seem problematic. But in the mid-1990s, with less public awareness of these issues and no clear legal precedents, Debbie and Michael created their own terms, and no one could stop them because both were consenting adults. The fundamental tragedy of Michael's relationship with Debbie Rowe isn't that it was transactional, it's that the transaction couldn't actually deliver what Michael really needed. He needed healing from childhood trauma. He needed therapy to process abandonment and abuse. He needed to understand that having children wouldn't fix the broken parts of his psyche. Instead, he got two beautiful kids who became the focus of all his unresolved needs, and those children inherited the weight of being their father's emotional salvation project. Prince and Paris didn't ask to be born into this arrangement, didn't choose to be raised without a mother, didn't decide to become the repositories of their father's childhood fantasies. They were loved, certainly, but they were also tools in Michael's attempt to reconstruct the past differently, and when he died, they were left to make sense of an upbringing that was extraordinary in all the wrong ways. Debbie Rowe gave Michael Jackson what he asked for: biological children, without the complications of a romantic relationship. But what Michael asked for wasn't actually what he needed, and the difference between those two things shaped the lives of everyone involved. The children exist. They're real people with their own thoughts and feelings, and they'll spend their entire lives navigating the peculiar circumstances of their origin. That's the legacy of the transaction between Michael and Debbie, not a family but a family-shaped arrangement that looked right from the outside but felt hollow from within.